Some of you might be familiar with Maker's Hour, the weekly event held on Mastodon, and I think it was originally on Twitter. Each week, our host posts 5 questions over the course of an hour, and creatives of all kinds have fun answering the questions, chatting, getting to know each other. It's a good time. Anyway, I take part in this from time to time, and a few weeks ago, there was a particular week that attracted a few new fibre crafters. Some of whom, in the company of these tinkerers and builders, musicians, hobbyist electricians, started to question whether they count as makers at all. Now, for the purposes of Maker's Hour, the answer is absolutely. All creative pursuits welcome. But at the same time, I do understand that feeling of doubt. Like, yeah, welding something together in your garage is definitely making, but knitting a scarf in your living room does kind of seem different, even though both involve creating something in the end. So today I just wanted to sit down and talk about this perceived difference between making and crafting. I'm honestly not sure where we're going to end up on this subject, but it is interesting, so let's just go with it and see. To start then, as I said, I do understand this instinctive urge to differentiate between making and crafting. I'm not sure I agree with it necessarily, but I do understand it. It seems to make sense to my gut, but when I think about it, I can't really articulate logically why. Which is not so great when you're trying to write a video script about it, so I turned to the internet to see if smarter people than me have already put this into words. Unfortunately, it's 2024, so mostly what I was turning up was just AI-written gibberish and adverts, so I guess we're doing this the hard way instead. To the dictionary! First, let's look at the definition for make. To bring into existence by shaping or changing material, combining parts, etc. 2. To produce, cause to exist or happen, to bring about. I'm pretty sure knitting that scarf in your living room hits both of those points, but maybe the page on craft can give us some further pointers. An art, trade or occupation requiring special skill, especially manual skill. 2. Skill or dexterity. 3. To make or manufacture an object or product with skill and careful attention to detail. Now this is interesting because obviously the third definition there is the most straightforward. We'll just gloss over the part where I always fail at the attention to detail. But making anything at all involves a certain amount of skill and dexterity, so according to this, are we saying that all making is also crafting? Then we have the first definition, which is talking about trades and occupations, so we're into professional craftspeople like, I don't know, carpenters and such like. By that definition alone, it's sounding like making is the more general skill and crafting is reserved for people making professionally or with special skill. But that can't be right. I don't know how many of you have watched shows like Project Runway or similar in your time. These ones where people are making things and being judged on their creations. One of the common criticisms from judges in these shows is when something looks a little too craft project or arts and crafts, and this has never sat right with me. By the definitions we've just found, calling something a craft project would mean it looks more professional, like it was made with great skill, and that's clearly not how these people are using it. So let's dig a little bit deeper. Felicia at the Craft Sessions wrote a great post about craft as a project versus craft as a practice that I think starts to get at the heart of the matter. Why has this word crafting changed over time for a lot of people? Why does it call to mind simple 5-minute projects for the kids over the original definition of highly skilled work? Well, Felicia makes a very good point, which is that in most forms of media that we are used to in today's modern world, magazines, websites, etc., they need to be accessible to the widest possible audience because that's what makes them money. So that's why we end up with these listicles of short, simple crafts that almost anybody could do. It makes perfect sense from a magazine's point of view. And to be clear, those are fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a simple craft project. One of my absolute favourite recent crafting memories is when me and Dave sat down and did those kiddie level Halloween crafts. I've mucked mine up, I'm not gonna lie.
Oh no, so I.
These air-dry clay ghosts are adorable and I will fight anyone who says otherwise. But it does mean that over time, the public perception of the word craft has become associated with this just grab a bit of cardboard and some scissors and a glue stick kind of project, and I do think that's a real shame. Crafting as a process, as quite rightly pointed out in this blog post, is so much more than these simple quick projects. It's about making beautiful things, sure, but it's also about slowing down, about reconnecting with what makes you, you. It's about letting your creativity fly free and empowering yourself by learning new skills. It's about all kinds of things. It's a bit like using the word food as an insult just because fast food exists. Yes, fast food exists. It's quite common. It's even really great a lot of the time. But it doesn't mean all food is fast food quality. That would be an absolutely ridiculous claim. Using craft project as an insult just because these air-dry clay ghosts exist? I submit that this is equally ridiculous. So back to our main question then, what does this mean for the difference between making and crafting? Well, it seems like some people, at least, are using it as a signifier of how much skill they think went into a project. But they seem to be doing it in the exact opposite way to the dictionary definition, which is weird. But I really don't think this is how most people are using the terms. If we take woodworking as an example, some of you might consider it making, some of you might consider it crafting, but I very much doubt any of you would think a beginner woodworker is a crafter until they hit some arbitrary skill level, at which point they become a maker. Clearly, there are some other criteria that people are using to decide which term applies. If I ask you to imagine a maker, a lot of you are going to jump straight to the types of people that you tend to find in so-called makerspaces. Electronics geeks, people manufacturing things with laser cutters and CNC machines, you know the drill. Get it? Drill. If I ask you to imagine a crafter, you might picture something a little bit more serene. A quiet, sunny craft room full of colourful fabrics or cardstock, a sewing machine in the corner, and maybe a rocking chair with a cosy crochet blanket. Sounds nice. But do you notice anything else about these two mental images? I'm willing to bet that most people, and by no means everybody, but most people, imagine the denizens of the makerspace as decidedly more masculine, and the crafter enjoying the serenity of their private craft space as decidedly more feminine. And if you did imagine them that way, that's totally okay. I'm willing to bet nobody that regularly watches my channel actually thinks men should be banned from cross-stitch, or women shouldn't be allowed to touch a chisel, or non-binary folks should be banned from pottery. But the fact is, there is a big gender divide in a lot of hobbies, and while we're chipping away at it bit by bit, it doesn't make you a bad person if those facts colour your mental image. So this raises a question, doesn't it? Is the modern usage of making versus crafting actually just another subtle way to unnecessarily gender hobbies further? As much as I, and probably you, wish it wasn't, referring to something as feminine, girly, etc. is still seen as an insult by a certain type of overly sensitive man. And for that certain type of overly sensitive man, I sometimes get the impression that referring to their hobby as making and mine as crafting is a way to signal, my hobby manly, big tools, not girly. While I was researching for this video, I came across a Reddit thread discussing unmanly hobbies for men. One commenter asked, do my plants and flowers count? And this one reply caught my eye. Only if you can't eat them. Houseplants equal unmanly. Farming equals manly. Most of that thread is very tongue-in-cheek, including this comment. But on the other hand, I do think it kind of gets at something fundamental there. Are you making something purely practical? Society says, manly maker, providing essential things. But are you making something with a strong aesthetic component? Perhaps even daring to express your own creativity? Society says, girly crafter, unnecessary fluff. And of course there are other ways to draw this line as well. For example, a hobby that uses tools that require greater physical strength or are quite dirty is always going to read as more manly to a lot of people. And again, you will find that these activities tend to come under making rather than crafting in common usage. But are these distinctions actually useful? Now, go with me here, but I do think labels can be very useful. I think it's a good thing to be able to communicate what type of hobby yours is, if only to find like-minded people. But in 2024, I would probably say that doing it along fairly arbitrary gender lines, it's not it. So, okay, where does all of this leave us? I think we'd probably all agree that the common usage of craft project to mean something is simple and basic and often low quality is not gonna fly. So if you've been watching this video and you're thinking you would hesitate to call yourself a maker because what you do is only crafting and you're not a real maker, well, you've probably fallen victim to this messaging a little bit, and I would really encourage you to think about how ridiculous that is and how little sense it really makes. Similarly, splitting the terms down gender lines just really doesn't serve any purpose in the modern world, and I think we can safely scrap that definition. Which leaves us with the simple, and probably was obvious from the very start, fact that making is just the act of bringing something into existence. And a maker is the one who did the bringing. Crafting could then be considered a subset of making, one that requires manual skill and particular dexterity. By this definition, all crafters are makers, but not all makers are crafters. And just so we're on the same page, I am definitely not trying to go the other way and make making into a lesser term here. But if you're running a model through a CNC machine, maybe that's making, whereas creating the same form by hand would be crafting. That's all. Maybe in this world, art also lives under the maker umbrella, art being less focused on the manual skill and more on expressing creativity. And art and design often get mixed up, but I'd say design belongs in here too, with its focus being more on planning and putting together information for various purposes. The maker using that CNC machine might also be the designer of the thing that they're making, using CAD software to map and plan out the finished piece. But also, they might not. They might just be the maker. I'm sure there are tons of other categories we could fit in here, and of course there's always going to be a lot of overlap. But after a lot of reading and pulling this all together, I can say that for me at least, crafting something has that added human element. The personal skill, experience and tastes of the maker, but also the time and the passion that went into it. Not to mention all of that hair that I always end up knitting into everything, but we won't put that part in our official definition. So what say you? Are you a maker? Are you a crafter? Do you consider yourself both at different times? Maybe you see them as completely different things rather than one being contained within the other. Or are some of your hobbies more on the maker side and some more on the crafter side? I didn't plan to make this video with any particular destination in mind, but the more I think about it, the more I get comfortable with this diagram here. I am a crafter. Not a super skilled one by any means, but a crafter nonetheless. And to me at least, that means I am also a maker. And occasionally a designer and an attempted artist, but that's a whole other struggle. So I guess the upshot is, next time you're wondering if you count as a maker, whether you're thinking of joining something like Maker's Hour or you're popping your head round the door of a local makerspace, the answer is yes. Tell them Michelle says so. Thank you, as always, to my lovely Ko-fi supporters. You make this and all of my other videos possible. And special shout out to the Stitch Squad, who are all extremely extra awesome. Mary Ann Johnson, Sunny, Candy Riley Pettinger, Laura Salets, Rosalie, Enlightened Flamingo, Cross Stitch the Globe, Cher Condon, and I'd Rather Be Stitching. I'll be back soon with some more crafty nonsense, so in the meantime, have a brilliant rest of your day and keep making cool stuff. Bye!